A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name's Brother Requai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to go through just a flip example of boasting in righteousness, right? And a lot of the things that we go through, and we come out, and we might be scratched up a little bit, but we come out, strong. Ultimately, the Lord, pretty much gave us the strength to be able to go through these different things, right? So this is just a bit of an exhortation, and understanding that when people hear the word boasting, people think that will come off in a sentiment of pride and arrogance. And we're not boasting in our physical stature, we're not boasting in the physical riches or the physical things that we have. If we boast in anything righteously, we're boasting in Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, of course, right? And that is one of the things that this world doesn't understand. So, what I wanted to do is to discuss an example of boasting in righteousness, right? So I'll start off with this first precept. As usual, this is Romans 15, verse 4, and it says that for whatsoever things that were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope, right? So just to give us an understanding of how to actually boast in righteousness, right? So I'm going to jump over to the account here. Just bear with me. My goodness. All right. I guess I'll just interject here and there, but hopefully this will be as very edifying, right? So this is First Samuel chapter 17, verse let's see where I'm going to start. I'll start at verse 34, and it says, "And David said to Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him." So this is a dialogue between King Saul and David. So at this point, David, he's anointed, but he's not actually the physical king at the moment, right? So, but this is going into a little bit of David's story, right? And the experience that he had, right? So I'll get to the boasting. The boasting comes a bit at the end, so just bear with me. I kind of just want to read through this to kind of also establish context, right? So this is verse 34, and it says, "And David said to Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth, I'm sorry. And it says here, where was I? And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. And thy servant slew both the lion and a bear, and the uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, since he hath defied the armies of the living power. And David said, moreover, the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear, and will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistines." So you hear the way David's speaking, because he had an accumulation of different experiences of things, of things that he went through. So he's discussing the lion, the bear, and to get, this flock, the sheep out, and rescued it, through all those different situations. The Lord delivered him out of those situations, was with him, right? And that's very, comforting to go to read about, when we're in the midst of, certain situations, right? Give us a certain mentality of boldness, right? So this, here it says, verse 37, and David said, moreover, the Lord hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, and he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head, and armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword by his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And it says, and he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip and a sling within his hand, and drew near to the Philistine. Right, so he didn't take much. He didn't take the armor that Saul tried to give him. Right, he had as might as well. And if you really think about it, if he had that armor on, trying to go up against Goliath, the armor actually might slow him down, because he didn't have experience actually, defending himself, protecting himself, fighting, in that armor, right? So it would just be a hindrance to him. It would just be an obstacle. It wouldn't actually serve him, at his best, right? So, furthermore, and it says, verse 41, and it says, and the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. When the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said unto David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and the beasts of the field. So right now, here's a dialogue between Goliath and David. And Goliath, at this point, he's talking smack, because he's looking at David. Man, this guy, he ain't got no muscle, he looking kind of, like he needs some rice and chicken. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just trying to put give an understanding into, what's paint a picture, of course, of what's actually being, what's playing out here, right? Because, in comparing David's countenance, when I say countenance, I mean like his physical countenance, in comparison to a guy like Goliath, big guy, David, don't really look, that big, so to speak, right? But he had a lot of experience, right? And plus the Lord was with him, right? So here it says, then verse 45, and it says, then David said to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord Yahweh Bashanosha of hosts, the power of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and will give the carcasses out of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and the wild beasts of the earth, and the earth may know that there is a power in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not by the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, that's powerful, man, because it's very it goes to show that the safety protection is really with the Lord, right? Like I read earlier, not earlier, but in a previous lesson, as the scriptures talk about. As a matter of fact, let me get it. I forgot completely how it goes. Let me just get it for understanding. This is Proverbs 21, verse 31, and it says, "The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord," right? So, you know, from the perspective of Goliath, he's doing all these different preparations, push-ups and curls and calling a name of his gods, which are no gods, and all this sorts of and all this that and the fourth, right? But the Lord was in David's favor, right? It was in David's corner, right? So, and he knew that and he spoke very boldly because of the past experiences that he went through, right? That's why it's always good to go back into past experiences, right? That helps to quell anxiety and doubt and so on and so forth. Verse, where was I? Verse 48, "And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, David hastened and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face of the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David," right? So he didn't have all that attire, that Goliath had, right? So, but you see that even despite the fact that he didn't have a lot of those things, he had Yahweh Bashemel Shai, of course, right? And that's what made him. And through his different experiences, he understood that, man, this is what made him a very bold person, right? This is Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. And it says, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are as bold as a lion," right? So what made him a lot bold was because he understood that the Lord was with him in all those different situations, and he had those situations playing out, and had all that experience, so you wouldn't feel like he had anything to be afraid of, despite his physical stature, so to speak, right? And that's another thing, I guess, a lesson for also for us as well, because sometimes and the flesh, as the scriptures talk about how the corruptible soul presseth down, I'm sorry, the corruptible body presseth down the soul, and weigheth down the mind, and museth upon many things. Just give me 1 sec, let me get my charger. Just plug this in real quick. Right, so as I was saying, it's very comforting to remember these things, because sometimes we allow our physical, I don't want to say the word defects, but we allow our physical things that we worry about, whether it might be, for example, a physical, you might have, for example, you stutter a lot, or you might have an extended I don't know, things like that, like unibrow, or baldness, or whatever. We allow a lot of these things to kind of get the best of us, to kind of override our thoughts, right? To plague, our mind, and dim, the our minds, right? We allow a lot of negative thoughts, especially the way we might, look within the flesh. And all these things are just a consequence of actually just being in a corruptible body, right? Because we have all these different feelings, and trying to, it really is, it's just essentially, as Paul said, it's, the spirit against the flesh, and the flesh against the spirit, right? And it's a fight, right? It's not easy, but the point is, to constantly, moving forward, right? And not allowing the physical, I don't want to say, I hate to say the word defects, but brothers know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like blemishes. Like when you go into, there were certain, like, priests couldn't have, certain, like, defects, like, for example, like a crook-backed or a flat nose, and you know what I'm saying, like those types of things that we might worry about and we might think about sometimes. Like, these are just, things that we might think about in the flesh, right? Rather than actually moving accordingly. You see how David's boldness, he moved accordingly because he had a lot of experiences, and that every time he was delivered out of these different experiences, the Lord was with him, right? So that's what intensified his boldness, despite the fact that he didn't have no sword in his hand, right? He didn't have the physical things, right? He had more of the spiritual things, right? He had the Lord, with him, right? So let me go to Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah 9, verse 23. And it says, "Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorieth in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord Yahweh." Right? So these are the things we delight in. This is an example of a righteous boasting, right? It's not, he didn't, talk about himself, and he didn't try to praise and glory in himself. He understood that the Lord was with him. So, that's pretty much it. As a matter of fact, let me see if I find that. Something that Paul said. Hold on. Is it 12? Okay, this is 2 Corinthians 12 and 9, and it says, "And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for me, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I glory in my infirmities, that the power of Hamashiach Yahushai may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches, in necessities and persecutions, in distresses for Hamashiach's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Right? And the Apostle Paul, he went through a lot. Shipwreck, and going into prison, and I think it was one time. I think at the end of Acts, there was a moment where he got bitten by a snake. So all these different situations, knowing that, the Lord was with him, he was bold, right? So remembering the ways of our forefathers gives us a sentiment of comfort, and that when we boast in Yahweh Bashan al Shai, right? And even thinking about your own experiences as well, remembering what the Lord, you know, delivered you out of this situation and that situation and so on and so forth, right? So, anyways, Lord's will that, this lesson was edifying, just another example and a righteous example of righteous boasting, right? There's a good and there's a righteous and there's a wicked way to do it, right? So, anyways, I sincerely just and pray that this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.